everybody, welcome to the CRE Arena. My name is Augie Schmidt, and today I just got whacked by a massive bug. And we are out here in Hawaii, outside at the SVN Partner Circle trip. And if you don't know, this is a trip for the top producers across the country. Probably makes up for the top few percent of commercial real estate brokers in the country across all different brands. So feel very fortunate to be here myself, and then also Mr. Brian Resendez here with me, who is known as a hotel broker and a top producer throughout the SVN network, but also throughout the country. So, man, just really grateful to have you here, and thanks so much for doing this. And
glad to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, to start us off, I really just want to talk about, how you before how you get into real estate. I know you've been on the West Coast, and that's where your landscape is as far as brokerage goes.
Yes.
But were you born and raised out there? So take us through where it all started to kind of where you are today.
Okay, sure. I'll try to summarize a little bit, but I was originally from Houston, born and raised in Houston, Texas.
Okay. Are you an Astros fan?
I'm an Astros fan for
Okay.
sure. Yeah,
All
I
right.
used to be a Houston Oilers fan. Grew up going to those games.
Nice.
Dad had season tickets, so we were regulars there too. But anyway, so I born and raised out there. I really hit the lotto with mom and dad. You hit the lotto just by being born into this country. Because we do have the greatest country in the world here. And mom and dad were great influencers for myself. Dad owned his own business. He owned some hair salons in Houston, Texas. So very early on, when he would take me to work, I would see what it was to be a hospitality guy.
Yeah.
Serving the needs of clients, listening to them. And it was a really good foundation, seeing my dad as an entrepreneur really early in my life. You fast forward into high school, and everyone is, a lot of people are scratching their heads on what to do. I didn't quite know what to do, but I had been in the hospitality business a little bit. My first job was actually as a dishwasher at the Olive Garden. I never want to go back and do that again, but it is a very humbling position.
Yeah.
And from there, I went on to work as a server and just kind of stayed in the hospitality business. And it happened to be that in Houston, at the University of Houston, they have the Hilton College of Hotel and Restaurant Management. I went ahead and went through that program. I got a bachelor's degree there, and then they had a master's degree program that was an accelerated master's program. I went ahead and stuck around and did that. So I graduated in 97 and 99 from the Hilton College of Hotel Restaurant Management, and with a degree in hotel and restaurant management, and then went with a degree in lodging administration. Mm-hmm. After that, I was looking for a job in the hotel business, thinking I was going to become a general manager of a large, swanky hotel. I kind of went down that path, and at some point figured out that those guys, I just figured out it really wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So over the next few years, I took some time to figure out, what it really was that was going to be the right thing for me. Mm-hmm. I always felt like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so over the course of the next few years, I moved to Steamboat, Colorado. I was a ski bum for a year.
Okay.
It was one of the best years of my life.
No, what is a ski bum? Like you're on the slopes all day, every day? Is that what?
Well, I actually moved there for a job because I wanted to work in the hotel business, and the person that I went to work for, him and I we really didn't get along.
Yeah.
So after a couple of months, we parted ways, and I went and looked for a job because I needed to support myself. So I waited tables in the evening at a fantastic restaurant in Steamboat. And during the days, I'd go snowboarding.
Yeah.
So I got in about 60 days of snowboarding that year.
Wow.
And then once the snow melted off, I got a job at the golf resort and played golf, and then still worked at the restaurant at night.
Yeah.
So then the week of September 11th, I decided to move and move on to a bigger city. I moved to Seattle. And because of September 11th, nobody was hiring. It was a kind of a really awkward time period.
Yeah.
But I did end up getting a job at one of the local hotels there. Stuck with that for a couple years. Eventually, I moved away and was planning on going back to Houston, but I ended up in Portland and called a friend up, and he said, "You called it the perfect time. We've got parties the next 7 nights." And I said, I don't have a job, I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have anything to anchor me down, so I'm sticking around here.
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of that week, he said, well, are you sure you want to go back down to Houston? Because him and I were both from there. And we ended up, I did end up leaving. I made it to San Francisco. I turned around and moved back to Portland.
Gotcha.
So once I was, and when I was in Portland, the real estate thing kind of started happening because I met some guys on the golf course that were mutual friends of some people I already knew in Portland, and they were in real estate, and they said, you know, I told them, you know, I'm interested in this, and so they said, if you want to do real estate, the way to, you need to go talk to this guy, Mike Grant. Mm-hmm. I did go talk to Mike. He became a mentor of mine. He became my employer for the next 3 years. He had a program of doing residential real estate, which is not really what I wanted to do, but what I learned from him, the first thing he said, if you want to do real estate right, understand the world of finance, real estate finance, because 90% of the brokers don't know anything about it. And those are very broad strokes that he's painting with when he's telling me this, but I did find out that that was mostly true. A lot of brokers don't know a lot about finance, and I took that and I ran with it. I was a mortgage broker for several years. I really did not like that. Yeah. I did residential real estate, which was good but not great. At some point, we started selling some larger parcels of land, agricultural land in our region, mm-hmm. and so that was, I was licensed in 2004 as a real estate broker. It probably took me about 3 years to kind of see the light and say, I've got this background in hotels, and now I have a real estate license. Can I fuse these two together and make something even bigger and better than what I have today? Yeah. And so around 2007, I went after that, and I really kind of never looked back. Yeah. Along the way, I left from the firm that Mike Grant had. I started looking for another firm, and eventually I landed with Cliff Hockley at mm-hmm. His Portland office. Right. At that time, it was Bluestone and Hockley, and within the next 2 years, he signed an agreement with SVN, and that's been the path to where we're at. Yeah. You know, with the franchise and working with SVN and this group of people. Yeah,
no, that's awesome, man. So if I'm doing the math correctly, so yeah, you said 2004, and then 3 more years is when things started to heat up, and 2007. So like, when things really started to heat up and get good for you in the business, and then 2008 comes through. What was that like? You know, I've only heard war stories. People from this business kind of talk about it all the time, and then I just like, being the young guy in the room, I just kind of nod my head and agree because I was like 13 and didn't have much of a care in the world of what was going on. So yeah, what was that like? Is just getting going, and then you know, kind of seems like the bottom fell out.
Well, and it was that way. I remember very specifically talking to a senior broker in our region who said, Brian, if I was you, I'd go find a beach and stay there for 2 years. Because you're not going to do any business over the next 2 years. Wow. That was almost true. We ended up having a very tough year. In 2007, we sold our first hotel kind of by accident. It was a hotel that was scraped and rebuilt into multifamily. The next year, I sold another property, which I really didn't know too well what I was doing. But we made it through it. 2009, we didn't sell anything, and in 2010, I think we sold maybe 1 or 2 properties. Yeah. It was a very hard time, but just like in 2020, now that we've been through 2 of these, we stuck to our program. We said, this is what we have to do every day. We go right back to fundamentals, making the calls, knocking on doors, returning calls, giving people the best information that we can, and being their center of the universe to some degree, and understanding the market as a whole in our very specific region, which is Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and it's only hotels. Yeah. We're very hyper focused in that way, and we don't let other things distract us in normal times.
Yeah. No, that's really cool, man. And going back to the fundamentals in those tough times, I mean, I know even for myself when things and things have been really good, and throughout my career so far, and haven't seen a fallout like especially like that. But yeah, I mean, even when things get crazy, or you just feel like you have so much to do, or you kind of get lost in the transactions. But to make sure you're going back to the fundamentals and those core principles that you're talking about, of the calling, the door knocking, providing value, and having the information that your clients can rely on, and then trust you as the local market expert.
Yeah.
So a couple of things here I want to touch on. So like for your bread and butter transaction type, what would you say? Because I know you guys do a lot of land as well, and then also existing hotels. So is it mostly land, mostly existing, and then is it like the I don't want to say mom and pop hotels, but how many doors do you guys refer to them as, doors or keys or?
It varies.
Okay,
it varies, but I think what you're asking is kind of what is our sweet spot in our most active asset class. Although we pitch ourselves as a hotel and land broker, I always prefer to do existing hotels. They're easier for us to understand. They're easier for us to value. It's easier for us to know who the buyer is before we even take it on the market, because we know our market so well, and we know the players so well. Land deals, they take more time. There's more red tape to go through, and candidly, they don't pay as well as an existing hotel asset. So, and we're kind of in this space right now where we've had so many hotels in our region go off market because they're being sold to housing. We expect that there is going to be a wave of new properties coming in for new development. But if I have to measure my time and my dollar per hour, I probably would do less or almost none of those deals and focus entirely on existing assets. The assets that we generally focus on are anywhere between 2 and 20 million. They're generally going to be, they could be smaller properties, usually larger than 20 rooms, but up to 200 rooms. But it's going to vary. And we prefer to work with owner-operators or owners of small portfolios versus REITs or institutional groups. We've considered doing that for a long time, but our approach is a little different. We want to have the absolute best relationship with that owner operator. We want to know everything about them and make them very comfortable with us. And we know that over time, that $2 or $3 million hotel that their parents bought when they came into this country 40 years ago is going to be sold at some point, and they're going to move up, and then they're going to do it again and again and again, whether it's within their own generation or for their children. And we're seeing that now. So we are starting to work now a lot with the children of many of these people that are first generation, in many cases Korean, in many cases Indian hotel owners. And we've had a lot of success doing that. So that we don't. I don't think it's even, if we had a lull in time where we were not able to, we didn't know what to do with our time, who else we should go for, we might enter that world of the REITs and the institutional capital. But we are so busy with what we're doing, we don't see any purpose for that. And there's only so much bandwidth we can carry.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. And that's kind of where I play as well, is that it's been like the 3 to 12, 3 to 15 million has been kind of like the threshold that I've dealt in, which has worked out really, really well. And just the people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Not saying that people from REITs are bad or anything, but it's just different when you have local owners and operators, or just private individuals, trying to make decisions. It's like, hey, you talk to 1 or 2 people and you kind of call them, text them directly. A lot of my owners and investors that I talk to and deal with, like, I just send voice messages on my phone, and that's how we communicate back and forth. But I've dealt with more institutional capital, and there's 5, 6, 7 people on an email chain, and it takes a couple days to hear back on things and get things approved. So, and the other thing in that I wanted to ask you was the conversion from, how much are you seeing like normal hotels, motels be converted into multifamily? That's something that's always interested me, and I've seen people do successfully. I don't see it happen too much because, I mean, obviously hotels, if they're ran well in good markets, they make significantly more money than locking up on a monthly rent or in like a multifamily style project.
Yeah.
But, how often have you seen that, and how is that done best? And if you can tell me your experience about that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't get, we shouldn't get sprayed.
There go the sprinklers.
Sprayed here.
So I would, it's an area that we wouldn't have expected we would be involved and engaged with, but we happen to be in the right place at the right time. Let's go back to 2020, and I remember one of my clients in maybe it was December started telling me about this thing called COVID. I hadn't heard anything about it. Obviously that accelerated, and around February of 2020, we had 7 deals in escrow, and all but one of them died, like within a week.
Wow.
So the banks stopped lending, and there were other elements there that happened over the course of the next year or so that just made it very difficult for any transactions to happen. At that same time, we had a person that had approached us named Homer Williams. He is a local developer in our region. But on the side, he has a nonprofit called Harbor of Hope that he uses to help the homeless community get back on their feet.
Yeah.
He said, Brian, we need to get hotels across the state of Oregon teed up so we can take them to the state and try to get funding. I didn't understand all the elements at that time, but what I did understand is we don't really have much else to work on right now.
Yeah.
We need to do something. So we made a hyper-focused attention on figuring out what are the right candidate hotels that can be converted. That started by figuring out what hotels have been under-demolished. We see Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt as leaders, in the franchise industry among their asset classes, which is kind of upper mid-scale hotels. But a lot of these economy hotels, where you saw again the first generation owners come from overseas and buy a small property, they're functionally obsolete in many cases. So we went after those people to see if there was interest in selling. Ultimately, I would say by Thanksgiving of 2020, we had approximately 23 owners across the state of Oregon willing to sell their hotels. They did it only by way of the relationship that I had with them or their family members.
Yeah.
Only trusting what I had to say, because we didn't have a real buyer set up yet.
Yeah.
But we had engaged with a group that said that they were going to be the buyer, and then we would assign them to the state. Once, so then around Thanksgiving of 2020, some things changed. There was a grant for $30 million that was assigned to the 7 counties in the state of Oregon because of fire damage. And then just after Thanksgiving, an additional $35 million was granted. So we had $65 million to play with. The plan was to buy 1,000 rooms at $65,000 a key. Ultimately, they ended up spending closer to $85 million on the project, and they acquired 19 hotels.
Wow.
Our group ended up doing 9 hotels with the state.
Wow.
So we did almost 50% of the deals. It was about 50% of the money. I think we ended up selling about $38 million worth of assets to the state. In the end, it was good for the community because we're helping people get off the street. Mm-hmm. It was good for the sellers because they were getting a premium price in what was really a buyer's market at that time. We were getting certain product out of the market, which was, you eliminate those rooms, it's good for the rest of the hotel owners. And we ultimately ended up becoming a community partner with the state of Oregon to help them find hotels to convert to housing.
Yeah.
So it was very much a win-win situation, and we did not have to deal with the banks because it was a grant. So the cash was already there, and it was administered by a quasi-governmental agency out of Portland. And we're doing the same thing now. That was Project Turnkey 1.0. We are now working on Project Turnkey 2.0,
wow.
which is less funding money. But as of today, we have 5 deals in escrow for the state. And I think by middle of next week, we should have 2, maybe 3 more in escrow with the state.
Man, that's
Now,
awesome.
whether they get to the finish line or not is a different question, but we will do everything we can to try to get them there.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And so is that providing, I know it's focused on, solving the issue of homelessness in your region.
Yeah.
And does that provide like transitional housing, or is it permanent, or?
Well, there's 2 parts to it, really. What I've talked about so far has been the public funding, and that is for transitional housing. And the way it works is a local nonprofit has to be the buyer, and they're getting funding from the state. And that local nonprofit could be housing. It could be housing for battered women.
Right.
It could be housing for people that are medically challenged. It could be housing for people that are coming out of some sort of addiction program. So every one of the nonprofits, it varies.
Yeah.
But it's all temporary housing. Now, there is a second part to this. For most of those other deals, I mentioned about 23 deals were in escrow. Half of those fell out, and later several others fell out with the state. But we had another group that came behind them that was a private group that was seeking hotels to convert to housing for more permanent housing as they were converting these deals to studios and things like that.
Yeah.
And in their case, we ended up selling a total of, I think, 12 deals last year that were not for the state, but still converted to housing.
Gotcha.
So, last year was overwhelmingly good for us. In a normal year, we'll sell anywhere between 6 and 10 hotels. That's myself and my 1 assistant. Last year, we closed on 26 hotels.
Wow.
21 of those were converted to housing. The other 5 were just standard transactional, hotel to hotel.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. And you said 9 of those were with the state?
9 of those were with the state, 12 were private, and then the remainder were just regular hotel transactions.
So the ones that were converted to housing, like, I know it's based on the pro forma of what rent is going to be, but what's the equation really? And I know it's not a loaded question, but it's a complex question. But what do you need to buy it? So if rent is $1 a square foot, can you pay $50,000 per door, or is there a more simplified equation like that? Because I also know there's conversion costs too, and I don't know all that goes into it. So I don't know some of the biggest conversion costs. I don't know if they separately meter them for electric and water, or how they go about the conversion process.
Well, whenever we're doing due diligence for a buyer, the best thing that they can use are utilities, because their model is going to be far different than running it as a hotel. And utilities are just one way to gauge what those varied and fixed costs are going to be. It's going to be taxes, insurance, and utilities. Beyond that, however they analyze it, I leave that up to them.
Yeah.
I couldn't speak intelligently enough about, what, certainly not what each market does, but even rents in general, and what those might need to be in order for it to be profitable when you include the acquisition and the cost to upgrade. I left that to them.
Yeah.
They said this is the pricing that we want to go after this with. We did our best to make it work. It did not work in every case, but in the cases that it did, then we just, we went down that road.
Yeah.
But as a threshold pricing, I would say one of the groups, and we've been working with several private groups, one of them has said, we won't go over $100,000 a key, and it needs to be in an opportunity zone. That is our requirement. We've had other groups that have gone at a higher price than that and not had that requirement for opportunity zone. We've had other groups that have said if it has a kitchenette in it and the zoning isn't right, we can deal with that. Or the zoning can be right, but and if it doesn't have a kitchenette, we can add it in. So
Yeah.
there has to be an incentive for that owner or buyer to be able to transition over from hotel to housing with it just needs to make sense to them.
Yeah.
So
So the question was, in opportunity zones, or like, I know there's additional tax incentives for like the operating procedures with properties, because I mean, from my understanding, that the best type of properties, to work through opportunity zone funds are things that are more operational in nature, like hotels, RV parks. So have the OZ zone, the OZs and the funds, like, have those been big for like the hotel business? And are you seeing a lot of deals, go through opportunity zones?
no, not really. No, not really. It seems to me that I could see that working for a conversion to housing, because if I understand the rules correctly, I believe you have to, whatever you spend on the purchase amount for the improvements, not including the land, but just the improvements, the building itself, you need to spend that equivalent amount in upgrades in order to qualify for all of the tax incentives through the opportunity zone,
Right.
deals.
Right.
But I really don't get into all that.
Yeah.
I leave that to them.
The tax experts.
I leave that to the tax experts, and I leave that to the owners and the buyers.
Yeah.
It's really their job to do that. Look, when I started, there was always like this gray area of where a broker's job begins and ends. And I don't want to discount the value of what we do and bring to the table, but mostly I feel like our effort is in understanding the value, finding the right buyer, and shepherding that deal to the finish line.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to understanding the incentives of buying a property, certainly we need to be able to like make it as rosy as possible. But by saying it's in an opportunity zone, that's probably enough for me. If somebody asks me to, dig in, I might dig in a little bit, but I'm really going to leave that up to them, because if they don't have their ducks in a row to know and understand that, I need to go on to the next guy that does.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be insensitive to anyone's effort out there to getting stuff done, but I also need to get stuff done, and that's where we have to draw the line sometimes.
No, it makes sense. And I mean, we all love self-sufficient buyers, and the buyers that, and that's what I've found, and I've talked a good bit about, is, man, the buyers that, that are really good, that, the guys that have been in the business for a really long time. For example, I had a guy that bought a property from me about a year and a half ago, and he started in the weekly mobile home rental business in Kissimmee, Florida.
Okay.
So weekly mobile home rentals, and now he's got a portfolio probably like 80, 90 million or so.
Wow.
And he's just, it's his own capital, and he's just kind of, adds value, refis, pulls out, goes and buys more assets. And he bought a $7.5 million deal from me, like I said, about a year and a half ago. And at the time it was one of the larger deals that I've done, but it was probably the easiest, because it was the sellers, first off, like, they had their ducks in a row. They owned and operated this property, it was their business and it was their life. Like, they both worked at it full time.
Yeah.
An older couple, and they knew everything. They had all of the accounting statements, they had all the rent rolls, and the rent roll was in order, the leases, everything. They had everybody's contact, and they were just on a first name basis with every single one. There was 38 tenants.
Okay.
So it was a multi-tenant industrial park. So, but the sellers really had their ducks in a row. But Bill, the buyer, was just, he was really, really sharp. And I'll never forget, kind of touring with that guy, and climbs up on the roofs, and really humble, down to earth guy, and but incredibly sharp, and asks really good questions. And he asks a certain amount of questions for me every time we talk, but at the same time he's very self-sufficient. and he's been through this, many times.
Yeah.
So, when you work with buyers like that, that have been there, done that, and then also when times get a little more, when times get rough, when things pop up, an appraisal comes short, or something happens on the phase one, or survey, whatever it is. There was actually something. It was like a corner of a building. It was like 5 square foot of a building was like in a flood zone, and they found this out like a week before closing or 2-3 days before closing.
Yeah.
So, but he knew exactly what to do. He said, "Oh no," and this never happened to me, so like I didn't know what to do. There was it was a corner of a building, about 5 square foot of a building in this flood zone. He sent me the map, and I was just like, no way. He said the bank's going to require me to get flood insurance. But he said, hey, don't worry. He's like, actually just did this like 8-9 months ago. He's like, I know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
I'll call you back in a few hours.
Yeah.
And then
Isn't
he called
that
me
great?
back in a few hours and was like, yeah, no, they'll be out there in 2-3 days, and we'll get it handled. Had to extend closing by like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. But yeah, operators like that know what they're doing and are self-sufficient. Those are some of the best groups to work with.
Yeah, expect the unexpected in this business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of a deal we did in Eugene, Oregon on a Hampton Inn where we were a week before closing, and the surveyor came back and said, I don't know how to tell you this never surfaced before, but the building is 2 feet over the property line. And the adjacent landowner did not want to play ball. Ultimately, we did get him to the table. We did get him to play ball. But that was a process that probably took an additional 3 months or more.
Yeah.
No surveyor prior to this had seen this.
Yeah.
The banks never questioned it.
Right.
It had been reappraised and refinanced multiple times.
Yeah.
But somehow it was just missed.
Yeah.
So these are the things. Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
And be ready to handle it. And
Yeah, that's crazy.
hold on tight.
So for you, what does a normal day look like for you? And I assume a lot of them look different. And that's one of the things I love most about this business is that truly like no day is the same. But what does a normal day look like for you? And then also what would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that you do every single day? And that could be anything from like whether it's quiet time in the morning, or make sure you make 15 business development calls, or what does a normal day look like for you, and what are some things that you have to do?
Sure. So I think a typical day. I wish there were a typical day. There's none of that because we constantly have to pivot. But in an ideal day or an ideal week, I'm up at 5 a.m. I have a workout session for about 2 hours. That includes being in a sauna. That includes being some cardio work, a little bit of weight work, and while in the sauna, there's some prayers and meditation. I like to do an abundance prayer. I also have some other prayers that I say just to kind of get my mind on track. It's a great way for me to start the day, saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is how I'm going to serve the people that I'm going to serve today and ongoing.
Yeah.
And then generally from 7 to 8, I am just kind of getting myself together, showering and spending time with the family. And then I'll jump on the computer around 8 a.m. And I would say between 8 and 10 a.m., it's managing all the email that's coming in, getting rid of the junk, replying to people, and then around 10 a.m. until around noon approximately, it's touching base with anybody that we're in contract with. It's touching base with my assistant. It's touching base with my broker in training. It's just kind of getting a good understanding of where we sit today. And there may have been no changes on some of the deals we're working on, but we still have to kind of talk through them. And then the second half of the day from around noon until 6 p.m., it is just a lot of replying to people. We do have some new business development that we try to do on an ongoing basis with outbound calls.
Yeah.
most of the time these days, it seems like we are just responding to most people that are calling on us to do this, that, or the other, but it really varies. And then 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., I generally call that family, friends, and music. I like to play music. It kind of gets my mind off thing, whether it's violin or piano or mandolin or guitar. I spend time with my son and wife, spend time with friends. We also go out to see a lot of shows.
Yeah.
That's just our form of entertainment, whether it's concerts in the park or any number of things like that to entertain ourselves.
Yeah.
So 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's really my work time. Now, a lot of times I'll have to pivot and I'll have to jump in the car and drive from Portland to the Oregon coast and back, or drive up to Seattle and back, or drive to Bend and back. And that's pretty normal for us. While I'm on the road, I'm still making calls and doing the best I can to be in communication with people.
Yeah.
We're very, very focused on communicating and offering the best information we can to our people,
Yeah.
so that when it's time for them to take action, we're there and available for them, and they know it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And one of the things you said that I really liked is kind of like that quiet time you have in the morning of abundance and gratitude. That was one thing I've really focused on a lot lately was really just like how being grateful. And I think that's one of the hard parts about being driven and ambitious and chasing and going after things. I myself personally, I can get so caught up in, hey, what is next and what I'm chasing after, because I have a very clear understanding of where I want to go and how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And I kind of chase that every single day and chase it pretty relentlessly.
Yeah.
But oftentimes in that chase, it can be you just lose sight or lose focus of where you've been and what God's done in your life, and where I've been, where I was before, and where I'm at now, and just how grateful I am for that.
Yeah.
So really the gratitude has been a big thing for me, that even 5 or 10 minutes in the morning has just made a world of a difference, because it really, really disconnects the constant chase and focus of hey, this is where I want to go. Which, like I said, it's a good thing to be focused and driven and all of those things, but focusing on what has happened in your life and where you're at today, and where you've come from, really just has made my days so much more clear. And I've just kind of been, throughout the day, have been more grateful and able to work on those things that are that I'm chasing, and that much more of a poised and relaxed presence, instead of an anxious and stressed, I have to get there. Less of that, still a chase, but like I said, more of a confidence of hey, this is where I'm going. It's not going to happen today. I can take a step or two today, but where I want to be, I'm not gonna get it all done today, and I'm not gonna probably won't see the fruits of it today, but I'm gonna continue to put in work and lay brick by brick every single day. So that's been something that's been really good for me. I can't say I work out for 2 hours. That's a pretty stout workout.
Well, it's not that intense, to be honest with you, but it is just a way to get some movement and break a sweat. And generally it's on a rower and a stationary bicycle, and then jumping into the sauna, which that's good quiet time. Yeah. Just going back to the prayers and considering and thinking about abundance. It is honestly probably the most powerful tool that I've had in my arsenal, and it's like man against himself, because I've seen it over and over again, where a broker goes out and he's successful in his first year or two, and I really think since 2010 up to about 2000, up till now, that interest rates are rising. Aside from the disruption of COVID, it's really just a little bit easier to make money in closing deals through brokerage. Yeah. We are now entering a time period where it's going to be a lot more difficult. And I've seen some of these guys go out and have stellar like first or second years. It's great, but don't go out and buy a Porsche.
Yeah.
You know, don't go out and like overspend. It's good to be humble to yourself, and it's good for you, and it's good for other people around you as well. We have a lot of guys that come to me and say, "Oh, you sold that many hotels. I see how well you're doing. You know, you're going to be a multimillionaire, and this, that, and the other." Just don't think about it in those terms, because I think that those prayers and those kind of self-guided ideas are so ingrained in me because I've said them for so long. And you know, as an example, you know, one of the lines in there is, "I accept failures because they will make me stronger." Mm-hmm. And you know, it's easy to feel down on your luck when something doesn't go your way or a deal goes sideways, but you know, you just got to shut that door and move on. Or if there is a way that you can bring it back to life, and if you're a broker with any experience, you've probably had to resurrect deals that you thought were going to die or should die. And there's a lot of deals we've done that should not have made it to the finish line, but somehow by the grace of God or our own efforts or both, we have gotten stuff to the finish line because we just, you know, we don't give up. And we're a little maniacal that way. Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate to have an amazing assistant who's been with me 11 years.
Wow.
She's very loyal, and I appreciate her more than I could ever put into words. But having that type of person to back you up and believe in you, because she knows what I'm doing on the front end of this, but she also knows what I'm doing behind the scenes with things like this prayer. And somehow it just seems to work. I forget the name of the movie. It's not The Promise or The Act. There's a movie about, you know, basically just having intentions. Mm-hmm. You know, and if your intentions are to be, you know, a jerk that's gonna you know, win no matter what, despite the consequences or collateral damage, you'll probably get there, but you're still going to have the collateral damage.
Yeah.
I have a different approach. I want to win, but I'm not going to do it at the harm of others. And I know that there's always going to be a deal out there in good times and bad.
Yeah.
And that's more of our focus, just doing a damn good job for the people that we serve.
Yeah.
No matter what. And if it's not the right time for them and something doesn't go right, you know, no harm, no foul. We're just going to move on.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And that was one of the things that I learned in it was probably my first year or two of this business. And it wasn't, you know, it was hard for me to get started, you know, which most people it is. And, you know, to get started in this business. But that's one of the things that, you know, I told myself was that, you know, I'm not going to be swayed by the money in the business, because it's no secret that this business can be very lucrative. You can make a lot of money, and, you know, it can be really great, and, you know, you can do a lot of good with it. But one of the things that, you know, early on in my career was, you know, it's like, hey, you wake up one day and then all of a sudden, you know, this deal comes together. And then all of a sudden, you know, you have, you know, stout, you know, 6 figures in your pipeline of like, hey, this deal's coming together, and you get really excited about it, and you get, you know, way up here. And then that deal would blow up or something would happen, and then I'd be here. And so, like, I remember the first 12 to 18 months of the business or so, probably the first 12 months, and I had a few, like, really rough days like that. And, you know, I had to, like, adjust very quickly, and because it wasn't fair to my family, you know? Like, some days I would come home and, like, I'd be up here, and then the next day I'd be down here. And, like, it was, you know, my emotions and just, like, me as a being was swayed. You know, finding your identity in just your production at work and the excitement of that. And I think it was a little bit rougher on me because, like, you know, trying to make a way. I was still trying to make a way and really hadn't yet. So it was, you know, I was riding this roller coaster of emotions and as a being, and like I said, would come home to my family like that. And then I very quickly said that, you know, I'm not going to let that sway me as a person. And, you know, whether deals come together, they fall apart, no matter what happens, you know, I know who I am, and I know, who I love and who loves me, and it's not for the money. And, that was one of the things I really had to put money in its place. So that's one thing I, told a lot of the younger brokers that are getting into the business is, make sure you know where money is at on your priority list. And I'm not the right one to say like, hey, where it should be, but I know for me personally, it's like number 5 on my priority list. 4 or 5, that's kind of where it lies. Yeah. And, there's a lot of other things that come before that that are vital to make sure that they are in order. And, being grounded in those first, 1, 2, 3 things, God, family, community, and, those things. In those things, like that's where I find my identity. Like that's where I know who I am. And like however this business goes, if it's a good day or it's a really crappy day, those people are going to be here for me. They love me and I love them, and that's who I get to come home to. So something I'm truly grateful for, but something really you have to adjust to like in the first couple years of the business, because as you know, you can have a deal blow up. And it was really cool. I actually saw this come to fruition. There was a deal that was almost like, it was like $250,000 in commission, and it blew up probably 24 hours before it got signed, and there was like no saving it. The city came in and said, hey, this is a no-go. So, I was frustrated, but I was frustrated, but, I think before that would have sent me for like a bad week and just like, been, a jerk to my wife or my kids, or like really just ticked off and not a nice person. But it was like, hey, I'm very fortunate, and I know the deals that are supposed to close are going to close, and the ones that aren't, I'm going to learn those lessons from. Yeah. So it's definitely a foundational principle is putting money in its place, and
I think that you just got to remember, you don't, if you're working with a buyer and a seller, you don't get a vote.
Yeah.
It's what they want. Yeah. You can provide all the best information and incentives, but in the end, you just don't get a vote.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hard conversations, and that's why brokers are in place to get the deal to the finish line and deliver messages that are not savory. They are not good all the time, and that's just what you got to do.
Yeah.
So we just got to remember to stay in our lane and get and be prepared for the ups and downs. And there are a lot of those in a 24-hour period. It's crazy. It's crazy. There is a certain mindset that allows us to do what we do well. And I'm amazed that I am where I'm at as a top performer within our company, and probably among the brokerage community as a whole in the whole U.S. I mean, I can't believe what we've achieved. But never would I, but I know I need to stay in my lane.
Yeah.
And that's probably part of the success, is that I'm not holding grudges when things don't go right. I'm just saying, okay, let's move on and get on to the next thing, because what choice do we have? Fortunately, there have been, probably more wins than losses. I say that because that's what I feel good about, and I know that's there, although when I think about it, there's been a whole lot of stuff we've worked on that has never even gotten to step 2.
Yeah.
But that's what it is, and we have to cast a very wide net to do that. I think for somebody starting in the business today, I would say, I know I'm moving on to a different tangent here, but
go ahead.
Sometimes people ask me, and we have had interns that have worked for us that I expect will probably come back at some point, but they went off to do their own thing. But they asked me, what do you do? And I always say, whether you're doing residential, whether you're doing commercial, find the asset class that you want to work on. If it's hotels, or multifamily, whatever it might be, pick that product type and then pick a segment within that product type. This many rooms, or this much revenue, or this type of franchise. Is it economy or is it luxury? Is it Class A or is it Class C? Is it going to be X amount of square feet or smaller, or this square feet or larger?
Yeah.
But know where you play. I know that the CBREs and the JLLs and the E-Stills that deal in our community area, they're focused on the properties of $30 million or more. And I don't want to play in that world.
Yeah.
I'm very good and feel very comfortable where we're at, playing with our owner operators in those types of properties, and it feels good for me.
Yeah.
But you just, you pick what asset class, and then you pick what geography you're willing to work on. In my area, it's Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. I've had some other people across the country ask me if I wanted to work on their property in Texas or Atlanta or Phoenix, and the short answer is, if it's a slam dunk, I would probably do it, but most of the time it isn't.
Yeah.
And I would reach out to that local person. And likewise, if there is somebody in our backyard that says, I've got this, 100-unit multifamily deal, I love that you helped me on the other deal, you want to work on this, I would say no. And even though it might be a heck of a big paycheck and a good experience, I would probably defer to somebody else in our office that could handle that in more efficient ways, because I look at those things as distractions.
Yeah.
On the residential world, it would be kind of the same thing. Pick a zip code and then focus on that and just be absolutely the best at it.
Yeah.
So, and we do, I say we cast a wide net within our area.
Yeah.
There are other brokerage companies that cast a wide net nationwide. I don't see how they do that, and that's never going to be a part of my model.
Mm-hmm.
We'd rather just know our territory and be absolutely the best at it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I could just tell, from sitting here with you the past 45 minutes or so is you're incredibly disciplined in your craft. So your craft of like, hey, here's where I am, here's where I am, and this is who I serve. And that's the other thing is, you know that where you're called and who you're called to serve, and it seems like you do that relentlessly. Which I would say I would say those two things. Like that's what I've seen of top producers across the country. Yeah. That's what they know best. It's knowing who you serve and how you serve them well.
Yeah.
And then doing that relentlessly, day after day,
yeah.
for years at a time.
Yeah.
Which is a awesome equation to a top producer.
Yeah.
So, well, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today in beautiful Hawaii at the SVN Partner Circle trip. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video and the podcast. Where can they find you? Are you on LinkedIn or any other social medias? Or?
I am. I'm on LinkedIn. The best website for us is nwhotelinvestor.com. From that website, there's all sorts of incredibly good information about the hotel market, specifically in our region, and some information nationwide. We are located in Portland, Oregon. You can also find us through the SVN network of brokers. We are also part of the Cornell Hotel Society. I'm a graduate of the Cornell Hotel School. We're part of the U of H Hilton College alumni. I'm on the board of directors of the Latino Hotel Association, which is a group that is building momentum for hotel ownership among Latinos nationally. We are members of the Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association, Washington Lodging Association, and we are regular attendees at the Lodging Conference and other conferences like that across the Western United States. We love what we do. We have fun with it, and if there's any way that we can ever help anybody answer questions about what is the hotel market, what is hotel investment, we will always make our best effort to do that for anybody listening here today, or anybody within our company, or anybody within our region.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.